There's unpaid work time, so it still seems to be a problem with people understanding that training is work time and bookends. So there's still a number of employers out there that will penalise their employees if they turn up 2 minutes late. They'll dock another 13 so that they aren't clocked in. So what happens to those 13 minutes because they've worked? And equally, when they're going home, they'll round it down. So if they leave 3 minutes after, they'll put it to the hour. And the inspectors kind of look at that and say, well, did they not work for those 3 minutes then? If they did, where's the pay?
114 of 518 cases were apprenticeship. So it's over a fifth of all the errors were because of the apprenticeship rate, which is quite staggering. And it's never been close to that before.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Payroll Question Time, June's edition. We've got an exciting panel joining us today. We can see in front of us, and we're ready to take your questions to help you navigate the world of payroll. Always a nice time to do a question time 2 days after the HMRC announced that criminals have targeted over 100,000 taxpayer accounts as they try and make false tax reclaims. I think the HMRC said that criminals gained people's login credentials and made use of existing online tax accounts. So I'm sure Simon will help us dive into some of that. We're just talking about that offline as well, just to keep things entertaining for you all. Most importantly, if you're new to Payroll Question Time, welcome. You are in a safe space where there is no such thing as a silly question. So anything you are troubled with, please do put it in the questions box and we will answer those in real time. We will also be running 2 polls today, so that's your opportunity to give us some feedback on some vital questions, and we'll analyse those results live on the panel as well. And just remind you all, if you're joining us, we are indeed recording this session, so you don't need to be there scribbling down lots of notes. We will send you the slides at the end of the recording once the session is over. When you get that recording, you will also get a survey. This bit's really important. If you're not familiar with it, it's our opportunity to ask you what it is you want us to cover in the next edition of PQT. So there's a particular subject, it can be about anything at all, maternity pay, sickness, whatever it might be, put it in that survey and we'll make sure we go back to that topic in a future PQT. Last but by no means least, I am going to read out a short legal disclaimer just to remind everyone that this presentation does not provide definitive answers to individual queries and in some places does take views on matters which are indeed uncertain. It is not intended to be relied upon in any specific context or as a substitute for seeking advice, legal or otherwise, on a specific circumstance, as each case may be different. Now, if you're not aware of our wonderful panel here, we've got, I believe, all of us this year just been announced in the Reward 300, which is very, very exciting. And I had an opportunity to meet with Karen and Simon in person last week in the beautiful sunshine of London to celebrate the feat. We've got a very experienced panel. If you're not familiar with myself as your host today, I'm going to facilitate the conversation. My name is Nick Day. I'm the host of the Payroll Podcast, the founder of JGA Recruitment, which is a specialist payroll recruitment agency. If you have any vacancies that need support, I am now a Reward 300 member and the Global Vision Award winner from Payo in 2024. So I've been in this industry for, just over 23 years I've established, which is actually a small drop in the ocean compared to some of the panel you've got in front of me. But I'm proud of it nonetheless. Anyway, enough about me. Let's introduce you to the panel. Let's start with Karen today. Karen, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here and very proud and privileged and humbled to be in the Reward 300, as it's been very well known, the 1% Club. But as somebody said on LinkedIn, Anna Lou, that's 1%. We represent everybody who's in payroll and or reward. So, whilst I'm very, very privileged and honoured, and I'm sure others will be. So I'm Karen Thompson. I head up the payroll services at Armstrong Watson for a day job. I'm also a chartered member of the CIPP and I sit on a number of HMRC forums, and latterly I've started to get myself involved and probably going to be a thorn in the side of DWP with the Employment Rights Bill.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Fantastic. And over to you, Richard, who's just returned from a wonderful whistle-stop tour of the most prominent locations across Europe. How are you doing, sir? I expected to see a slightly better tan.
I purely did it for payroll research across Europe. No other reason.
I never doubted it. I never doubted it for a moment. Your pictures of you eating ice creams while you were away were definitely all about payroll.
It was very, very interesting listening to other people's legislation. So, hi, Richard George. Director of Education at the Payroll Centre. We are the largest payroll trainer and corporate membership business in payroll. 39 years this year in payroll. Obviously started very, very young. And I could probably replicate a lot of Karen's. Number of consultation groups, Broad 300, and always been in payroll. So
Fantastic.
lost the bet.
And by last but by no means least, our very own human encyclopedia of all things payroll, who would give every chat GPT its run for its money. Mr. Simon Parsons, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Simon Parsons, Director of Compliance Strategies at SD Worx. Been in industry a fair number of years. No longer part of Reward 300. I'm now part of something called Partner 50. Again, with the same people, but pleasure to be part of Partner 50. I sit on a lot of the same committees and panels as Karen and Richard. Some of them overlap, some of them don't, and different. Again, with HMRC, DBT, and DWP. The interesting aspects, I think, Karen, is getting up with DBT because they seem to be on their own rather than part of the tripart group anymore. I think we're covering some of that today, Nick. I'm just wondering what payroll is like at the top of the tower at Pisa, but I'm sure it's very interesting there, especially when the bells go.
I think it tastes sweet based on the number of ice creams which had been eating. He kept sending me photos. I won't.
Sure.
We've already had some questions.
I think there's a lean towards HR.
Lean towards HR. All right, very good.
I'll go now. That's it.
The cognitive capabilities of this panel is beyond measure. We've already had some questions coming in as well, so do keep those coming. We'll get to all of those when we jump into the main part of the show. But let's just talk about what we're going to be talking about today. Today's discussion topics are indeed national minimum wage, the Employment Rights Bill, pensions and summer workers, childcare benefits, and if you've got time at the end, we're going to cover a few other hot topics or any particular Q&As we haven't got to during the course of the show. We will also bring to the fore the SD Worx Academy, a number of courses that either yourself or your team may want to get involved in, and a couple of other links and things that may be of interest as well, such as the latest episode of the Payroll podcast. The link will go in the chat towards the end of today's show. So let's jump into the first subject today, which is going to be national minimum wage. While we jump into that, I'm going to ask Simon to give you an overview while I see what questions have already been popped into my questions box, and I'll address those in just a moment. Simon, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So it's been just over a year since the last naming list has been revealed, but we've had the name and shame list of those that breach national minimum wage, 518 new employers named. That does cover a number of years, so it's not all in the year. Those are all the finalised ones, I guess, over these past 12 months, but some of those cases started up to 5 years ago, I believe, from memory. It may be even a little bit longer. And also the HMRC have issued guidance. Their focus in their bulletins is now on apprentices. They've covered other areas before, such as deductions and bookends of work, which apparently was still the largest number of breach cases, but they're focusing on apprentices, which I think from memory, I'm saying this was about a third of the cases where minimum wage is being breached, predominantly, I believe, because a lot of them aren't really apprentices at all, apart from calling it. There's no training contract or arrangement with colleges for their attendance at all. It's just someone's advertised the job as an apprentice and they've accepted it on that basis, paid them on that basis, and when the inspectors called, they found that they're not an apprentice at all. So it's just being aware. So I think we've highlighted some of the main areas. There's a whole table of reasons, but the largest number was deductions. There's unpaid work time. So it still seems to be a problem with people understanding that training is work time. And bookends. So there's still a number of employers out there that will penalise their employees if they turn up 2 minutes late. They'll dock another 13 so that they aren't clocked in. So what happens to those 13 minutes because they've worked? And equally, when they're going home, they'll round it down. So if they leave 3 minutes after, they'll put it to the hour. And the inspectors kind of look at that and say, well, did they not work for those 3 minutes then? If they did, where's the pay? Increasingly, that's more of a problem, and I think we'll see more employers coming into play. Some years ago, a lot of that didn't really matter. The reason it didn't really matter is because we all paid way over the minimum wage rate, I don't know, 20p an hour. So it wasn't really a problem. However, this year there's probably more employees paid 12.21 an hour than ever before. So when you're actually paying the national minimum wage, the national living wage, these sorts of things that didn't really matter before become critical, because they result in all work time divided into earnings for national minimum wage, coming up with a value. Oh, it's below 12.21, sometimes significantly, and sometimes it may only be a penny or two, but it's still below. So the other areas that HMRC spot in the audit is that people have forgotten to change the rates at all. So there's still a number of employers that haven't updated their pay rates. They gave them a job in January, they're now paying them in June, and they haven't uplifted the rate. The other is that constantly goes on. It's one I don't know if it's really critical to payroll activity, and I'd love to have a debate with some of the NMW specialists and even the audit of worker status. Now, worker status is important in relation to how you calculate national minimum wage. Breach, I've got to understand or fathom how critical that is actually to payroll activity day to day. I think that's more of an assessment of breaches. But the critical answer to all of that is pay your people at or above minimum wage, following the rules, but understanding what impacts it. The other aspect, I think I did a blog the other day, was on the publication, was it last week, I think, or of the IFF research undertaken by HMRC of the use of pension salary sacrifice. Salary sacrifice is a major area that causes breach. None of those cause you to be named because they don't name salary sacrifice breach cases, but they do make you pay the underpayment. So the list won't list anyone that had a salary sacrifice breach unless they had other breaches as well, because the commitment from 3 or 4 years ago from the minister's direction is that they wouldn't name salary sacrifice breach, but they do make you pay them all the same. But it's a propensity on salary sacrifice for pensions, and it proposed different treatments for national insurance. And something I've mentioned to the Treasury in some consultation is if they really wanted to eliminate salary sacrifice pensions schemes, give national insurance relief to pension contributions as well. And then everybody be on an equal footing. And it wouldn't breach national minimum wage law either, because pension contributions from the employee don't reduce NMW pay, but salary sacrifice do. Sorry, I've gone around the world there a little bit, taking us all around Europe.
All right, well, I've had a couple of questions come in. I'll get to those in just a moment. A quick question for me, actually. How much of a deterrent is being named? Are we, is it frightening employers? Is it making any difference to their ability to recruit, to retain, to attract? Because we see the numbers. 518 is a pretty big number of employers to be named, but I don't know, you'll know maybe from your side how much of an impact that's having on employers. Karen, I see you nodding. Maybe I'll come to you for that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, as far as naming and shaming, I would say unless they are rogue, i.e. they have deliberately done it, in which case throw the book at them. But there's a lot of employers who have genuinely made a mistake, and naming, shaming, and again, you look at the areas. So if you take someone like Cumbria, where I am, having an employer named and shamed, everybody's going to know about it, and that can impact their business. So it's the reputation of the business. Now, whether that prevents recruitment, I haven't got evidence for, but I can say that that is their key concern, because they didn't mean to get it wrong. They're more than happy to put it right. They just didn't mean to get it wrong. But if I could go into a bit more on the back of Simon, if I may, what we're seeing is, because of those 518, as Simon said, some of them are quite old. And whilst the many will have just made mistakes, it seems a bit of a shame that 5 years later, they've probably long forgotten that they ever did this. And now they're out there again, named and shamed. So I think it's a bit poor of the, of HMRC or of the low pay to actually name them when they're years old. But anyway, we are. But what I was going to say on apprentices is to really watch, because if you use a service provider, it's very important. So I've come across a few where the individual, where they are an apprentice, because that can affect national insurance as well. So they're on a different rate of national insurance depending on their age. but they've then ceased becoming an apprentice. They've just decided it's not for them. Is if you use a provider, remember, you will need to tell them, because if you don't, they don't know that that individual is no longer an apprentice. So just to watch for that. And in addition, looking at national wage, and what I'm seeing a lot of, and they seem to obviously be in the Cumbria and the Yorkshire area, is what I'm seeing with our clients, is in that hospitality, leisure, caravan parks, hotels, and the biggest area that they're finding is accommodation. And I know instantly when a client comes to me and says they're having a compliance check, and I say, okay, well, what have you? And they'll say this, oh, we do accommodation, no visibility in payroll. It's never gone near the payroll. Immediately, I know exactly why HMRC are going to be looking at them, and it will be to do with that accommodation, and they won't have done the offset. And in every case that they've spoken to me about, that has been the case, but there's nothing going through payroll, through direct debit, so we wouldn't even know. So even though you can remind clients to the hilt of, if you're in these industries where you offer accommodation, please remember. So I would just like to reiterate that point to everybody who's listening to this moment. If you're in the industry or you're a service provider, try and do as much as you can to remind your clients this is a hot spot area at the moment. And I think I'll just leave that there, but I'm seeing a lot of activity in the compliance space for this.
That's good. That's what the panel's here for, right? To be forewarned is to be forearmed. So, going to help anyone that's got a payroll that may involve some of those issues, hopefully be informed so they can make quicker decisions for HMRC get involved. Richard, I saw you nodding along there. Anything you wanted to add?
I think that the apprentice one's got a lot of focus this time around, more because of the percentage. It's definitely a hell of a lot. So I'm going to be really sad now because I know it's 114 of 518 cases were apprenticeship. So that's over a fifth of all the errors were because of the apprenticeship rate, which is quite staggering, and it's never been close to that before. But other than that, it sits where it sits pretty much every time, with deductions at the highest point, and obviously work salaries being second. But again, sorry.
That would suggest to me, as Karen was saying, because 118 of those apprentices, it may be genuine errors. I know we need to get those errors correct, and we need it.
Oh, absolutely. It's the treatment of the individual, though, isn't it? And that's the key. But I think also what's really seen a lot of focus this time around when it comes to work time is this whole annual hours aspect, which people never really got their heads around, and probably in a lot of cases still don't. It is an absolute rabbit hole. And we're talking here about reaching contractual hours before the end of the year, and therefore the further hours worked not having been officially paid for. And therefore the calculation around that is substantial and very, very costly. So I think there are a number of key areas that get good focus as well because of the naming and shaming. But I think if I then put my payroll centre hat on, and we talk about queries that we get now, it's all salary sacrifice. We've spoken, interestingly, on this for at least the last two about this removal to net deduction. And it's still very, very clear that there is still a very high mentality that that's acceptable, e.g., the holiday scheme that the individual has sacrificed for, the pay goes down, move the deduction to the net side and all will be well. Well, it truly isn't, because it's still that benefit to the employer. It still comes under the national minimum wage rules, and your options are extend the period and reduce the sacrifice, stop the sacrifice, or it's you, the employer, who will be picking up the difference anyway. So I think there's still this very, very key misunderstanding around the true nature of employer-funded benefit, whether it be sacrifice or not. So very, very important area.
We've seen a number of things on the...
I'll come to you just a moment, Karen. Just Simon's, I think it's both got a point. It might be the same one. I'll come to you first.
I don't know, but a common question on Facebook groups this week has been about people paying from their net pay membership of the private medical scheme for their spouse and children. thinking, well, that's okay because it doesn't reduce NMW pay. But they're joining the corporate scheme. It does, because that breaches Regulation 12 of the National Minimum Wage regulations. So there's lots of misunderstanding on what's happening here. And we've had it before with the bike. There's an element of, if you change the bike to a deduction, that makes it all okay. We're not breaching national minimum wage. It's the employer's bike. So who are they paying? Oh no, it's come from X company. It hasn't. It's a facility by the employer as a benefit. Therefore, they're paying the employer. So that breaches Regulation 12 as well, which reduces national minimum wage. There's still this perception sometimes, and it's quite often in conversations, that national minimum wage is about paying 12.21. It's not. It's about receiving 12.21 for all hours worked after you've dealt with all the other nuances of calculation, including you must reduce national minimum wage by net deductions, as people call them, for buying benefits. It doesn't work, or salary sacrifice. And I think that's critical. I think that people are really confused about it. You work out national minimum wage earnings, doesn't include overtime premium, doesn't include shift premium, and you divide it by all the time they've worked, you've got a rate. And as Richard's saying, sometimes I think the expectation is that the payroll can pick up the annualized hours position. Don't see how, not until you get to the end anyway. So lots of those things are external audit questions in relation to compliance. Payroll can do some of it, it can't do all of it because it doesn't know. Doesn't know if people have been asked to stay half an hour extra and not be paid, or come in early with the key holder, but you're not going to get paid until 9 o'clock when the door opens. Payroll doesn't know that. All it knows is what the data it gets. Sorry, Karen.
And just before Karen goes in, sorry, Karen, because there was a follow-on to.
Yeah.
Sorry, Karen. There's a follow-on that there is a third one for Simon's item as well, and that is where the individual purchases themselves for something that the employer needs. Obviously, if I work for a DIY business, they tell me I've got to have steel cap boots, but they're not going to provide them. I therefore have to buy them myself. It is the principle that whichever pay period the purchase was made, the receipt for that item has to be looked at against national minimum wage as well, because it's a requirement of the job. And again, that's another one that is very, very commonly missed and has created naming and shaming as well. Sorry, Karen. Over to you.
I was just going to give a little hint. Some of the questions that were being asked, and I think a lot of this is to do with the rise in national minimum wage and employers and the costs and everything else. And it's they've got employees who, and this is quite a few questions we've had from various clients. They've got employees who want to remain in the salary sacrifice, but they, under automatic enrolment, they're paying minimum contributions, E's and R's. So they're saying, well, instead the employer, where in the past employers might have upped the salary to allow employees to remain in the salary sacrifice scheme. What we're being asked now is the employee said they want to reduce their percentage, so the employee's percentage, to pay into their pension so that they can stay in the salary sacrifice, because it takes it to the point where it won't impact national minimum wage in these cases. Then they want to pay the bit they would have paid in pension out of their net pay. So my warning is, when you are considering all these things, remember an effective salary sacrifice is a contractual change. So whether you're reducing, you're putting in, whatever, it isn't an effective salary sacrifice without that contractual change. And you'll need to do the same for those coming out of it. Their contract should be changed. Obviously, they're not in it. But just watch, if you're reducing employees' pension contributions under AE, you will then not be compliant with automatic enrolment rules. And therefore the individual may have to opt out and then become voluntary in whatever its scheme. So just think about it. You can't just do that. There are consequences.
We've got 7 questions that have come in so far, and they came in thick and fast. I'm going to run through those in just a minute when we've won our first poll. Something just occurred to me, Simon. You were talking about the 3 minutes after work or the arriving early. How does that work if the employer hasn't wanted them to work the extra 3 minutes. You're contracted till 5. I didn't ask them to work over the time, but I didn't ask them to turn up early. They were indeed working, but my contract states it's 9 to 5:30. If they choose to do those extra hours when I have not requested them to do so, I would argue there's a little bit of a grey area there. I can see Karen nodding her head as well. I don't know. I actually don't know how the rules would apply in that situation.
Yeah, well, you don't necessarily have to pay them, but I'd suggest that the HMRC will want to know in the audit process that you've told them they're not to work. The fact they do work is neither there. So if you say work commences at 9, you're not to do anything else. But equally, they'll want to know why they're there early. Now, if that's their own voluntary position, that's fine. But if the manager's told them to get there 15 minutes early, work has told them. I had this with a conversation with a retail company some years ago. And it's sort of, well, we tell all our employees that they don't have to, and they don't this, that, and the other. And there was an element of thinking that's really good. My daughter has a summer job with you. Do you know what the manager tells them? And I think it's important. It doesn't matter what the HR policy is it? It's what the local guy tells you to do, or gal, and you follow their instruction because you want to please them. And so there were instances there where they were told they had to be there 15 minutes before opening, and they weren't actually allowed to go home until 20 minutes after all the tills being cashed with the key holder, but they're only paid from 9 till 5:30. And so it's looking at those sorts of things. So it's set your policies, make your management know that's the policy. And I think you're on safe ground. If they turn up 10 minutes early because they feel like it, let them know they're not meant to commence work. And that you have a policy that can demonstrate that toward it, I think you'd be okay. But if it's sort of we don't expect them to, but they do if they wish to by voluntary arrangement, you may find the audit people consider that a bit woolly.
Okay. Thought I'd ask the question. Well, let's run to our first poll. When the poll is running, I'm going to ask all of these questions. So Kate, Ian, Eleanor, Gemma, all of those that put questions in the box, thank you for your patience. We're going to come to those in just a moment. Poll number 1, with significant rises and the name and shame list, are you worried about national minimum wage breaches? 3 options here for you if you're listening in audio. That's yes, no, or not applicable to me. So 3 options there. While we're running that poll, let's run through some of these questions. I'm going to start with the national minimum wage questions first. But thank everyone for their patience if you're waiting. First one then comes in from, let's go down to these. Let's ask a question from Kate. It says, can you explain the rules around deducting an employee's family member's medical insurance as a net deduction? Should this deduction be checked? It doesn't take the employee's salary below national minimum wage, even if it is taking after tax and national insurance calculations. Simon, obviously you brought this up as an example, so I'll come back to you for this.
Sure. Yeah, well, if you look at the Regulation 12 and its guidance, it doesn't care whether it's come from gross or net. So the taxation and national insurance position has got nothing to do with national minimum wage. It's who the payment is for. But with expanding out to a deduction to pay, are they members of a corporate scheme or it is a private arrangement? And for many of these, they're a corporate scheme. So they're actually members of the employer's scheme. Not it's in the name of Mrs. Smith and their child Joe and Clarice with a private policy with Bupa or one of the other medical providers. It's they are members of the ACME Limited Medical Benefit Scheme. Well, if they are, then that deduction is an payment to the employer. You could say, well, we pass that on to the provider. Doesn't really matter whether you pass it on or not. It's not a payment of the individual for it. It's a payment of the company for it. Therefore, it's 1, reportable as a benefit in kind. You could, if you've taken it as a deduction, report the amount made good for P11D purposes. So it reduces the tax liability in the Class 1A because they've made good. But for national minimum wage purposes, it doesn't work. The deduction will come off national minimum wage earnings for that period. So you do, or suggest you do need to check that national minimum wage is not breached.
Perfect. Another question comes in from Eleanor. It says, does national minimum wage apply when an employee is on paid sabbatical? Can salary sacrifices still be processed? Karen, can I come to you for that?
Getting into the tax world here, but if they're obviously not working, then no, in my view, Simon, but for me, no, national minimum wage won't apply because they're not actually working for you. They're somewhere else. As far as what was the second bit of that, Nick?
Can salary sacrifices still be processed?
I'm not sure why they would be processed if they're not working for you. So I think this depends on how this sabbatical's been set up. So
Says
again,
on
that
a
probably
paid
goes with
sabbatical, if that makes a difference.
they're what,
Rather than
sorry?
on a
paid
paid
sabbatical.
Ah, so
Yeah.
right, if they're on a paid sabbatical, would they? I mean, Sam, we're going to go with you here. Would they need to be checking that they're not, if they're being paid by that employer, they're on a sabbatical, are they working somewhere? Is it like a secondment or is it a sabbatical where they're off touring around the world and therefore you could argue they're not working, so national wage wouldn't apply. As far as salary sacrifice, I imagine that then goes into contractual agreement of,
So the
you've agreed as
sacrifice,
far as their sabbatical.
with the sacrifice element, if they have sacrificed for the benefit, then it obviously continues. Because you would suspect that they would have sacrificed before they went on
That's
sabbatical.
assuming
So
it's all in the
kind of like,
contractual part, yes.
absolutely. So kind of like maternity, you don't have pay anymore, but the sacrifice is made and the contributions continue. I guess the issue is the principle of, if they're being paid, they must be doing something, and therefore surely the rules would be applicable.
Well, it depends on what they're
Is it-
doing. If they're not working, they're traveling the world.
Well, as I say,
Are they
Yes.
working?
who pays a sabbatical if somebody's travelling around the world?
It seems strange, doesn't it? Now, some may offer, I don't know, 2 weeks sabbatical leave paid to do, I don't know, voluntary work or so. There's various scenarios. But if we get down to the facts of what it is, doesn't really matter, Nick. You can apply the salary sacrifice to anything. The question is, has a breach occurred? The way the breach is identify all earnings for national minimum wage purposes. If they're on sabbatical, there probably are zero earnings. The salary sacrifice will reduce that zero earnings, even if you've paid money, will reduce that. So if that was 50 quid, they've now got national insurance, NMW earnings of minus 50. That's the reality. If they've done no work, you divide that by zero. So actually there isn't a breach because there is no time worked. However, if you start a period of a sabbatical and you've got a day paid or 2 days or a week, or 2 weeks in a month, that salary sacrifice will be reducing the national minimum wage for the work time. So you've got potentials for breach. So there's an element of, if there's no work time, you're actually okay. But if there's some work time, you may have a problem. That's sort of how I view it.
Okay. Another question then comes in from Ian. It says, we pay average holiday pay to our colleagues, which look back at the overtime and bonuses paid over the prior 52 weeks. If an employee leaves and there's some outstanding holidays to be paid, should they also get the average of those additional payments, even though they aren't actually taking the holidays?
Do you want to answer? I'm going to say my view is yes, because they have an entitlement of leave. So you're paying them compensation for them not having that leave based, and you've also got a recovery potentially if they've had too much holiday. The holiday payment is the 52 paid week earnings average.
Yeah, the guidance clearly states as well that the holiday, within the working time regulation, that the holiday payment should not reduce an individual's earnings from when they are working. So, yeah, it should. You can't.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something else in there, though, if I may, given its employment law. But don't forget as well, that will depend. Are these workers irregular hours, part-year workers? Are they falling under the UK legislation, which is why you're applying the average? Or is it the fact that from an admin burden point of view, you decided we're just going to do this and we do it at a certain point in the year and they're not under those, then in which case you're going back to case law as far as holiday pay goes and what you pay. So is that in your contract that is what you will do? In which case I would agree, if you've got it in the contract that that's how you calculate holiday pay, even though you don't have to do that if those overtime and such like is voluntary. then I would say you do. So just to be aware, it's contractual. What type of worker are they? As to, does the UK legislation apply, or does the case law guidance, let's call it, because it isn't legislation, guidance apply that you are then interpreting?
So I'm thinking there are three aspects there that Karen's just mentioned, I'd say, so they are slightly different. So correct, for a regular worker doing extras, there's a requirement for 52 weeks earnings average for 4 weeks as a statutory minimum under Regulation 13. Some may argue, and I think it was the East Anglia ambulance case, of why you make any difference for the extra 1.6 weeks. But there is no requirement under EU judgment for it to be against the 1.6 weeks because the judgment has been made under Regulation 13. For the new ones that Karen's mentioned, which are irregular workers, they don't get 5.6 weeks leave at all. They get an accrual of hours or rolled up holiday pay. The accrual of hours is based on a percentage based on what you would normally give someone as entitlement, minimum 12.07% of the average, and it's rounded in a funny way. But there is an accrual of hours for sickness, maternity leave as well, which will be a surprise to some because they wouldn't have done that before when they did holiday accruals. But there is, where there isn't a 4-week distinction, that includes all overtime and commission. That's just a thought. The rate of pay is the average of earnings divided by hours over the previous 52 weeks to find an hourly rate. So you accrue hours and then you pay those hours at that hourly average. Can that be below national minimum wage? I'd suggest it can, because holiday pay isn't pay for national minimum wage purposes, and there is no work time for it either. The other method, rolled up holiday pay, you haven't got any holiday to pay for a leaver because they're getting 12.07% on top of all their pay, and that includes overtime, commission, etc. There are certain pay elements it doesn't necessarily have to include, but they're all there. And there's no distinction between 4 and 5.6 weeks for irregular workers. It's there.
Don't forget
captured the whole
all
way.
the holiday pay. They're irregular workers or part-year less than regular workers, because the Supreme Court said it's unlawful. So it's only if you're applying and you're able to apply the UK legislation. It was supposed to get simple, wasn't
it? Simple.
Oh yeah, I love the fact that the questions are challenging our panel. Let's get back to the poll. We've had 87% of the audience respond to this, and it was neck and neck for most of it. We've just finally got a winner, if there is such a thing. With significant rises and the name and shame list, are you worried about national minimum wage breaches? For those listening to this back on audio, the answer was yes, 45%, no, 48%, and not applicable, 7%. Any thoughts on those responses, Richard?
Not right. The NAs is always going to be low, but I think it's the principle. What type of businesses have you got? What workforce have you got? What earnings do you pay? I think you're always going to see a fairly equal mix between the two, but also people's attitude to it. And we find that, most courses that we run, you will have a fairly hefty split down the middle in relation to people's view on the subject. So, no, I'm not really particularly surprised at all.
Okay, good. Well, let's jump into the next part of the section. I'm aware we've still got 3 questions to run through. I want to get the slide in front so people know what we're talking about, which is indeed Employment Rights Bill. Before we get to that, though, let me just run through these questions. I don't know if these are as complicated as the last. I know they challenged our panel, which is great. Let's start with this. Comes in from Gemma. A new court-agreed law on gender. How will that affect payroll and also GPG reports? Do we know yet?
Yeah. Do you want me to have a go? Well, at the moment, it doesn't affect payroll to the extent that payroll always had an element of, well, it depends how it goes, always had an element of gender had to be present. So if we talk about, we've had cases where people have challenged and saying they've chosen to be neutral on gender, etc. Neutrality on gender is not permitted in taxation law and never was. So the court judgment doesn't change that. I don't think the court judgment has changed the fact of the selection process taxation-wise on being the gender by gender recognition or etc. It hasn't changed that. I think the ruling is more in relation to social interaction of building requirements and rights and sports. So as far as aware, I'm saying the ruling hasn't changed a former taxation position. And the former taxation position, if people want to know, because we've had a number of requests, is I want to be gender X. You can't be for tax. Now for HR law, potentially you could. And certainly for gender recognition, you could be a different gender for gender recognition than your tax position. But the tax position is fairly clear and isn't really impacted payroll-wise. HR-wise, I think it's a confusing mess potential to look at.
And we've had this question before, haven't we, on PQT? There doesn't seem to be any appetite from the HMRC to change things as much as people may want it to. It looks like it's going to stay relatively binary for the foreseeable. And I know that does offend and isn't suitable for everybody, but it just is the way that it is. And I don't think the HMRC have much appetite to change it. Okay, great. Next question. Also, if someone has been off sick for a long period and has run out of CSP and SSP now and has now resigned, do we have to pay full pay for notice period? Attention payroll leaders, if you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet.
Yeah, so that's a tough one. There's two aspects, because you'll look at some of the guidance on ACAS and it'll tell you that there needs to be 1 week of payment for notice. But I think there's an element of understanding what that really means and what the circumstance is. Potentially, I'm thinking if they've resigned and they don't work, you don't necessarily have to pay them at all. And you've already paid them probably, and you may even have recovery. However, some aspects, and I guess it's worth thinking about, they may actually have outstanding holiday entitlement due and other things, because leaving triggers that in. But it depends on the circumstance, I'm going to say, Nick, because the ACAS guidance does indicate that you may have to pay 1 week. Now, if the employer got rid of them, I'd tend to say that would be a different matter. So if the employer is saying, okay, because of this, blah, 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 we're giving you a month's notice, should there be at least 1 week's full pay in that? My suspicion is yes.
I would agree with that. I'm going to put a caveat in. We're getting an awful lot of employment law stuff coming through here. So my caveat is I'm giving a view, but I am not a qualified employment lawyer. Everyone do, but I would agree with what Simon's just said there. You need to see what's in the contract, but if the employees just said, I'm not coming back, that's me, I'm resigning. And I can actually use my own husband for that when he did that, the police, was retiring. He said, I'm coming back, but he get paid. He just got his holiday pay and everything else. So I think say, but unless you've got something different in the contract, of course. But I think if you give notice just due to, we're going to do.
Super. Your signal's a little bit intermittent, Karen, just so you know. I'm not sure if there's a little reset there just to come in and out. Okay, great. One question I think is more payroll than employment law and anything else. Hopefully a quick one for the panel. I'll come to you, Richard. If you have an employee on long-term sick who's over 28 weeks, who no longer qualifies for SSP, do they still receive their pension contributions while they are off?
No, sickness is different to maternity and other forms of leave. Pension is based on received with SSP with sickness. So once it's zero E's and R's. Unfortunately, it's one of the big negatives of sick absence in comparison to other forms of leave. So yeah, you're literally paid percentage calculation on received. So if you're receiving zero, pension payments stop.
Super.
And it's something where there's a little bit of confusion. And again, it's been on social media quite a bit recently, Nick, as well. Sorry. Pension contributions for sickness is based on actual earnings, employee and employer. It's not based on normal pay. For maternity protection, ease is based on pay they received. Hers is based as if they're still working full time, normal pay, and it's only for paid maternity periods. Now, I see some people mix that together and think the rights are the same for sickness as maternity. They're not.
Oh. Yeah. The last question, I know we're keen to get into the important rights, but anyone who's waiting for this section has been staring at this slide for the last couple of minutes. Thank you for your patience, but I'm keen to get through these questions. It's the last
two
one.
people in the picture. The two people in the picture have actually retired since we've
should I swap that for you, Lisa, with your ice cream, Richard? If an employee is paying for a dental flex benefit via a deduction from their net pay, not salary sacrifice, and this contribution is paid over to the third-party provider within a couple of days of the payroll completing, does this still reduce pay for national minimum wage purposes?
Probably. Yes. It's a question. Is it an independent scheme to the employer that they just facilitate a deduction, or is it the employer's corporate scheme? So is the policyholder the employee, or is the policyholder the employer and they have members that are employees? So let's be clear here. Anything facilitated by the employer, so it's an employer bulk policy. So I'm a member of my company's medical benefit schemes and dental scheme. It's a benefit in kind. I actually pay nothing, even if they deduct money from me or operate salary sacrifice. I've paid nothing to the benefit provider. For under Regulation 12, that money is considered to be being paid to the employer. The fact that the employer then sends that money on somewhere else has got nothing to do with the individual, is how the law is constructed. That's an employer matter. So the audit people will take the view that you've taken the money off the employee to pay you, the employer. The fact that they get a dental benefit as a result of that, whether it's pre-tax, after-tax, whatever, well, that's got nothing to do with it.
Okay. Well, I've never heard Article 12 mentioned and left so much. Richard?
Yeah, who holds the contract? Basically.
Yes.
Let's make it very simple. If the employer has the contract for the benefit, it is a benefit in kind.
Great. Well, listen, let's jump into the Employment Rights Bill. We've got there finally, audience. Thank you for your patience. I've enjoyed the pictures in front of you and our panel. Keep challenging, though. Keep the questions rather coming into the box, and we'll get through those in real time. That's really what the show is about, answering your questions and queries. We know if you've got a question, the chances are one of the other 100 people watching this show right now live and more on LinkedIn have got similar questions. So please do ask them. We want to make sure we're giving you as much value as possible through this show. Right. Employment Rights Bill. This came through in one of our surveys. People want us to tackle this. We want to find out what's happening with zero-hour contracts, guaranteed work, and the progress on employment rights. So, Karen, if your signal is good, would you like to give us a bit of an overview?
It'd be good if I could get my mouse to work so I can take myself off mute. Hopefully my signal's doing. I have moved my phone. It's having to operate off the mobile today. Apologies if I dip in and out. This bill is just huge and is still going at a rate of knots. The true answer to all of this is we can only give you with what we know at the moment, because the devil is going to be in the detail of all of this. Because I was saying before, I was volunteered with DWP for on the SSP part. So while the Employment Rights Bill, as Simon said, is actually Department for Business and Trade, and they're going to do this Fair Work Agency, for which likes of SSP will fall under. Let's hope they take some HMRC experts with them when they do that. There's a lot of uncertainty around, because they've come up with all, the government have come up with all these ideas of what they want to do, but how these things are going to operate. So I can share some thoughts of what I'm hearing from businesses, what their thinking is. So the 0-hour contracts, it has changed from the original, we're going to do this, we're going to ban 0-hour contracts. They're not going to ban 0-hour contracts. They're going to stop exploitative 0-hour contracts. Let's see what the definition of exploitative is. This is where that devil in the detail is going to come. There's a lot of employment lawyers out there, HR professionals, are obviously keeping a close eye on this because it will impact. But then I'm hearing sort of some businesses to say, well, they rely on 0-hour contracts because, so if you take, because obviously the biggest thing as well is agencies are going to be brought into this, which I think is going to be a massive challenge for those, so it'd be recruitment agencies. And of course, they don't have necessarily contracts, because an employer could phone up and say, I need a resource today, and I may need them for 4 hours. This individual may come back this afternoon. How are they going to manage concessions that I think these contracts, and these are some of the concessions when DBT starts to look at these kind of things, they are going to have to concede that what they've actually put is not practical in the real world. So I don't know whether other panelists agree with me, but I think there's an awful lot of, I'm going to call it hype in the bill, that's got, whether it's good intention, you agree with it as an employer, as a union, as an individual, there's all of that. But it actually making it work is going to be a lot more difficult than those who put all these ideas, mainly unions, I might add, into this bill. And if you read the report, it does say it's had huge influence from many unions who, of course, back the current government. Guaranteed work, again, it's all sort of fitting in. What will guaranteed work look like? I think many will support what already exists, which is an employer can't stop an employee doing another job if they haven't got a guaranteed hours, contracts, and what have you. Now they can have multiple jobs, but to guarantee work is a case of, I think, more around, if they have the business says, we want you to do X, and then suddenly withdraws that. So in other words, we would like you on shift. They've not had the opportunity, so they haven't sourced other work. They then have that shift withdrawn. Then there will be that employee will still need to pay for that shift or what have you. So that's sort of the sort of impact there. As far as payroll goes, in those two bits, we don't really get involved in the contract side of things unless they have fixed hours. You've got some retailers saying they'll do, if they're 0-hour contracts and they can't have them, they'll do 1 hour a week, and the rest will be overtime at plain time. So there'll be lots of things, employers and the employment lawyers, having done a number of events with employment lawyers, are coming at it from a payroll angle versus a huge HR angle. They are all busy thinking about what they might do to mitigate some of these rules that just will not be practical. But again, I think, this bill is going through, and I say it was with the Lords, is it back at the House now? So, and of course the House are going to agree it because it's majority of those who put this forward. So I think it'll be after that the Fair Work and say, for me, pray for anybody who who's religious, that they do bring in the right experts to be at this, because of course they're going to be responsible for many other things. But for SSP, whatever that turns out to be like, and we still don't know what that's going to look like either. We know it's one day, we know there's no LEL, but what does day one mean? When does the 28 weeks finish then? Is that 28 times the number of qualifying days that somebody does in a working week? Who knows? But we are going to need software to do this. But they're also going to be responsible for the compliance of holiday pay, which is the bit I find absolutely intriguing, considering there is, other than that UK legislation 24, but even then, that guidance that goes with it says, please note, this is guidance only. You should seek independent advice from an employment lawyer. So I'd love to know how they're going to do compliance on those. So I think this bill, yes, it's moving. Yes, will it happen? Yes, it will. But I think the end detail of how bits will work will be, as there's plenty of people, including everybody on this panel, will be involved in the various bits of consultation to find practical ways for it to work. And I'm sure everybody who's listening who does know this panel will know that if there are bits that they are suggesting that are not practical and work, we will shout very loudly from the rooftops to tell everybody that what they're suggesting will not work.
Fantastic. I'm loving the energy, by the way. And I'm going to just come over to Simon, because when we get some of the vital bits, we're just losing you slightly. I don't know if it's just me, and I don't want to make people to get all the info and then suddenly miss the most important bits. So I'm just going to jump. That was a great overview of the bits I'm able to pick up. There was a couple of moments we just zoned out. Simon, I don't mind. Let's go to you, Simon, because you were nodding and smiling, and I think you probably picked up on the elements that we may have just lost a bit of audio on. If you can just I guess update the early sections that we didn't quite hear, and your own thoughts as well.
Yeah, sure. So just summary on some of the 0 hours that Karen has mentioned. So there is a potential new right to guaranteed hours. All right. So it doesn't eliminate 0 hours, although there are exemptions, which always seems strange because there's a provision for collective agreements between trade unions and employers to opt out of the 0 hours law. However, the consultation on the implementation has already started. I can't really say too much detail there that I'm aware of, but it has, so be aware. And so it won't occur before April 26, may not occur before April 27, might occur mid-year, because those are the sorts of questions that started to be asked, is what happens if it's implemented at point A, B, C, D, E, F, G for software and industry. But there is this right to guaranteed hours. So statistics show that there's 1.13 million people on 0 hours contracts. Statistical information a number of years ago has indicated that the average working week for a 0 hours contract was actually 21 hours on average a week. So there is an element, is it being used for legitimate purpose or not? There obviously is legitimate purpose. The other thing about guaranteed work, and then the other is right to reasonable notice of shift. Now, it hasn't been set out what that is. And is that going to be just for a judge? But they are having powers to say what is reasonable notice. But again, the statistical information shows that 20%, 59% of variable hours workers receive less than 1 week's notice. So they don't know what they're going to work next week. And I guess there's a feeling, is that acceptable? And there's 13% of 0 hours workers don't know what their hours will be tomorrow. But they may be asked to work tomorrow. And I guess that's what the government are thinking. So I guess there's an element, if we're reliant on that flexibility of workforce going forward as a business, is that more of a, because I think the ONS and the government are thinking, you're just badly planning. Now, in some industries, it'll be essential because there's a party on tomorrow and we need 20 guys or gals to man and deal with that because that's a late arrangement. There will be that sort of thing, but I think they're saying, but for the majority, you knew what you needed weeks ago. Why haven't you assigned? And there may be an element of business needs to get into a position where it plans better. But the cancellation of shift may be the one that sort of drives that, because there's an element of a number of workers are turning up. You see it in social media, you see it on employment rights, Facebook pages of I turned up for the shift. They said I wasn't needed. I got sent home. I spent £5.60 on a bus fare or whatever, or a taxi. Can I claim that off my employer? The answer is no, sort of thing. You can get knotted. Here, there'll be an element of if they've cancelled it on that basis, you'll be entitled to a compensation payment. And that's what we've got to look forward to. Is that overly a problem? I think maybe that's a direction of modernisation of planning. So we plan better so that we don't. Whereas at the moment, is there an element of laziness? Don't know. Am I being unfair?
Your thoughts, Richard?
No, I think it's there's too much we don't know. Obviously, it's not all going to happen at once. It's definitely going to be a very long-term phasing. I think it's very critical to remember that actually there's a lot of people who like zero-hour contracts, which mustn't be forgotten. My son being a prime example, more than happy on his contract because it gives him the flexibility he wants as well. So I think there's quite a lot on this one. So, yeah.
I've just had a moment of shock there, Richard, that your son is now working on a 0 hours contract. I've known you for so long. And I think the last picture I saw, he was about 8 years old. So that scares me how long we've been doing this job.
He's only 9.
He is still 8, but I got him out working because I thought he should be.
Right. Yes.
Okay,
it's interesting, Nick, that yesterday the employer bulletin has started releasing some information on this. So the employer bulletin that was published yesterday has started pushing out information on the changes to statutory sick pay. Doesn't say when, but it's starting to get into the open space. This is coming.
We've got a question coming in from Sego, and it says, in a case of an employee who is classified as an apprentice and is being paid the applicable apprentice rate, I think it's what it refers to the previous chapter, should any overtime hours worked be compensated at the same apprentice rate, or should those hours be paid with a national minimum wage rate of £12.21?
The whatever you pay would be divided by the work time into that. But you'd find if you paid £12.21 wouldn't count towards national minimum wage rate pay. The apprentice rate would be for the overtime. Does that make sense? But I think if you read Regulation 12, it's rather complex the way it's written. But what it says is that the NMW earnings is determined by reference to the lowest rate. Does that make sense? So if you did pay £12.21, they consider the difference to be a premium. That doesn't count as NMW earnings, and you can't sacrifice it either. All right, does that kind of make sense? But if they're a really apprentice in the first year of their apprenticeship, if they're over 19 or whatever it is, you don't have to pay £12.21. No.
Amazing. And as if by magic, as we're about to go to our next section, which is pensions and summer workers, Andy Nichols, our pensions expert, has joined us, almost like we've timed this and facilitated it perfectly to land exactly on your section, Andy. So let's jump to that slide. Pensions and summer workers. Does pension auto-enrollment apply? What about postponement? Really, they're only with us a few months, and pensions bill just published. Small pot emerging value for money retirement income. So Andy, without any kind of warm-up whatsoever, let me lead it over to you and give us a welcome, and if you can, guide us through certainly the pensions bill that's just been published. Anything else here that you think might be useful for our audience? Welcome.
Oh, we can't hear you, Andy. Yes.
Can't hear you.
Try the microphone button. Oh, we might
unable to come back to the panel. Ah, God, you left us with it's like a cliffhanger. A cliffhanger. I know, you've joined us, but we can't hear your wonderful knowledge. Simon and Karen are giggling away, and we've lost Richard. So it's all changed here at PQT. All right, let me come back to you then, Simon. You can give us a bit of overview while we're waiting for Andy to sort out his technical issues. And Andy, give me a thumbs up when you're ready to go. Simon.
Yeah, well, I'll do my best on what's out. And actually, the pension regulator has distributed out to software developers and payroll service companies yesterday. Its campaign for summer workers came out yesterday, but it's just a reminder that lots of employers are taking on summer workers, and sometimes there may be a view that pensions AE doesn't apply to them, or they don't have to think about it. And I think Andy, if he can talk to us, will probably confirm that actually it does. However, there is still the ability to postpone those who are entitled workers for 3 months. So it may be that by the end of that postponement period, they've gone anyway, so you haven't had to enrol them, but we'll see. So that's just the aspect there. We might be able to hear you now, Andy. I can hear some noise. Do you want to speak and see? Yeah. Oh.
Oh, almost another false dawn.
Almost.
He can talk. He hasn't got the signal to support it. So back to you, Simon.
Hello?
I was going to say as well.
Yeah.
And it's also
Yes, go ahead.
No?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Oh, good. All right. I don't know where you got to. I thought I'd log out and log back in. Classic how to solve IT issues. Switch it off and switch it on. Yes, does AE apply? Yes, it does for summer workers. As in, if you've got someone employed, you need to assess them. But as maybe Sam has already mentioned, you can use postponement. You can postpone someone from their start date, but if they're not going to trigger in that first pay period, you don't need to postpone them. So wait until they do trigger and then postpone them. So when they meet the criteria to be automatically enrolled, earn enough from the right age, and then you got 3 months maximum to postpone them to. So if you got a summer worker and they're going to be employed for 4 months and they earn enough and old enough from day one, then chances are postponement will end before their contract ends, and you may end up at the end of postponement, if they still meet the criteria to be automatically enrolled, having to automatically enroll them and put them in the scheme. But of course, they could opt out, and any deductions could be refunded. But if you do refund them, you need to refund them before they've left, because once someone's left, the opt-out falls away and they won't get the money back. So, and neither will you as an employer. So timing, therefore, becomes quite key at that point. And of course, during postponement, and individuals say, yes, I want to join the scheme, please. I want to opt in. And if they are opting in, and there was an eligible job holder during postponement, a knowledgeable job holder, and there was a job holder of some form, then they will be opting in, and they will very likely join the beginning of the next pay period. So then they will be in the scheme, and you will be taking contributions. They're logically not going to opt out because they want to be in, and contributions will be paid. And guess what? That'll probably mean they'll have a small amount of money in that pension scheme, which becomes a small pot, and that comes into the pensions bill, because someone who's got less than £1,000 in the new pensions bill, when all that gets processed, they're going to try and consolidate all those small pots using like mega funds, probably, but that will take some years for that to go through and process. In the meantime, we'll have a small pot of money, which they will have, and it will grow potentially subject to what the investment's like. So yeah, please use postponement if you want to, for people who are going to be just employed for a small period of time, but you may end up having to put them in the scheme because postponement ends before their contract ends and they don't opt out. Any other thoughts on that, Simon, that I may have missed?
Well, yeah, probably not, Andy. I think you've covered it, but at the beginning you mentioned something that many people probably don't realise, and it's a conversation I have often, is they think when they're taken on an employee, the postponement has to start from the start date. And you indicated that it doesn't. It can start from the point they trigger being an eligible worker. Is that right? So
yeah,
until their earnings have reached the trigger point, you don't have to do anything apart from communicate with them that there's a scheme. It's only when it triggers over those earnings that postponement has to start, which may be a month after they started,
right,
or some point in between.
Yeah, or even you could have casual workers over summer because they're school leavers, but they are university leavers, so they're 21, but they turn 22 during their period of casual employment, and you could then apply postponement at that point, because you can apply postponement to any starter. But why do that? It's only really when they trigger that period in which they trigger, the start of the period in which they trigger, because they're old enough and they earn enough. That's when that gives you maximum postponement period.
Exactly. And that's the way we tend to work in SD Worx, is by default, it's assessment-based postponement, not starter, because that's the beneficial angle for the employer, not necessarily the employee, but the employee can choose to start whenever they like. But for the employer, it leaves the enrolment point to when it's really applicable to eligible job holders.
Yeah, and of course, and you probably are aware, everyone, that there's a pensions bill has been published, which doesn't really look at contribution levels in terms of that's still to come, in terms of automatic enrolment changes to thresholds and contribution rates and any of those things that might happen. But what it does talk about is all to do with pension schemes and trying to make them more effective, giving more value for money, meaning that the amount of money you're putting in, particularly those in defined contribution schemes, those schemes are the ones where the amount of money that the employer and employee puts in will determine how much money you've got when you come to retire. That's the pot of money you build up. Well, the government are very keen to ensure that that pot of money is the highest it could be by making sure investment is good, making sure that schemes offer value for money. And when you read through the pensions bill, you'll see that they're all about scale. It's all about larger the pension scheme, the more efficient and effective they should be, and therefore pension schemes need to make sure they're offering value for money. They even talk about the amount of money that you need to have invested. 25 billion is mentioned as being the sort of size of scheme you should have as a minimum. So you may find that a pension scheme you're in, if it's not offering value for money, then it may end up being closed by the pensions regulator. And then you'll end up, as individuals in that scheme, you'll get put into another scheme, which will be your choice if you don't know. But the scheme will close. So that could impact yourselves in payroll. But obviously, most of it is all about making sure schemes are good, effective, making sure the amount of money that's invested is getting the best return possible. And it's not just DC schemes, DB schemes, because defined in benefit schemes. Employers at the moment tend to have their pension schemes tend to be in surplus, but they're looking at DB super funds where employers can, because the employers always worry about the employer has to make sure there's enough money in the DB pension scheme to cover the last dependent being paid their pension. And the onus is on the employer making sure enough money is in the scheme. And now, it's because these schemes are in surplus, it's been looked at, do the pension scheme, can they give some money back to the employer? And should they, what can they invest in? And where employers are concerned about the pension scheme, want to take that liability away from them, they might move from a DB scheme where the employer is directly involved to a super fund. Have a look at there's a load of paperwork. We'll probably put some out on the message just to look at some paperwork which gives you the information about what's coming in the pensions bill. But in terms of payroll, watch this space. Not significant yet, apart from possibly closing scheme. I'm waiting to see what phase 3 does in terms of contribution rates. The automatic enrolment changes coming in. No news on that still. At least I've not heard anything, Simon, in terms of a lower threshold going to 0 and the age going from 22 down to 18. All silent on that, as far as I'm aware.
Well, we're still at that. Well, I have to start. I think Karen shared it. So there's an employer bulletin yesterday on pensions for seasonal temporary staff. There's a link there in the chat notes. So if you're watching this and you've got the chat function enabled, there's a link there that'll give you more information. We'll take us next to the next poll, just to get the audience participating again before we go into our next section, which is going to be on childcare benefits. The poll is, does your business have 0-hour contracts? 3 options here for those in audio: yes, no, or not applicable. In a moment, I'm going to come to Richard to give us an overview of the childcare benefits section. We're waiting for those results to come in. We've still got time as well to bring everyone up to speed with what's coming at the SD Worx Academy. But in the meantime, I'm going to put something in the chat as well if you are active about another webinar that might be of interest to you, which is called Why Product Thinking is Reshaping Global Payroll. It's one that I'm hosting. It's on the 26th of June, Thursday at 4 o'clock. It's completely free. I'm hosting that with Lara Smart, who was a GPA award winner this year. It's going to be a 3-part webinar series, completely free to join. But if you're interested in discovering how product innovation is really impacting the future of payroll, why it's evolving from process to product, how innovative companies are setting new standards and what it means to embed value in the heart of global payroll systems, then please do check into that webinar. Should be a really fascinating conversation. A link will be in the chat. Right, let's see how this poll is getting on. At the moment, we've got, does your business have 0-hour contracts? Yes, it currently says at 38%, no at 57%, 5% say not applicable. Karen, what would be your thoughts on those results? If you have them on our screen for us, please.
I can't see the results yet.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. I'm not surprised because, again, a bit like as Richard said before, when we're looking at the other poll, it will depend on your type of business. If you take where I work, we don't have any. So obviously it would be no here. So I think it depends on the type of business. Although I am surprised that there's so many that don't, to a degree. But as I say, it would come down to the business.
Fine. Well, let's jump into childcare benefits then. Over to you, Richard. You've rejoined us. Do salary sacrifice schemes for nursery workplaces work? What's the latest on childcare vouchers and government's tax-free childcare? What does it mean? What do you give us?
Something short. So obviously, nursery workplace schemes is going to. We've seen quite a lot of growth in, especially since COVID, and it really is that bringing people back to the workplace. There therefore is a number of different options when it comes to nurseries themselves, whether it actually be within the workplace, managed and owned solely by the employer, or an external nursery, and it can be public or government nursery, where the employer has a substantial impact on its management. And all of these come under the banner of workplace nurseries, and because of that, give the availability of using salary sacrifice as a form of saving for the employer. So there is high value in them. I would suggest it's probably for a lot of employers, more so because we used to talk about it in last year's payroll course, but it's not a focus for many. If you go around a room, who's got one? It will be a very limited aspect. I think partly that would be down to limited knowledge of what it actually means. A lot of people would see it as having a nursery. Well, that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. With childcare vouchers, it's just an eroding piece of legislation. It's gone. It went years ago. Most schemes now are teetering on the edge of closing in a lot of businesses, purely because with no new entrants and generic leaving, the number of people remaining in the schemes has gone down and down and down. No view as to shutting them, no view as to removing it as a form of sacrifice benefit. It's just obviously because of the legislation now and the fact that you haven't been able to join it for 7 years, 8 years going on. In principle, you're in a position where it's just where it is. Obviously, the key aspect around it is the annual review. So doing a review of the tax liability position for staff due, obviously, to the variation that has in the amount that they can sacrifice. So most employers or employees, should I say, are therefore left with a further option, which is the tax-free childcare scheme. This was introduced at the point that childcare vouchers was removed as a, I guess, possibly more viable option to get relief on childcare. Key reason being it's per child. So in principle, for every £80 a member puts in per child, the government then tops that up by a further 20. So it could even be the case, for instance, that it is more effective than what childcare vouchers were, should, for instance, you have multiple children under the age of 14. So the government's plan is there. You add that then to, obviously, especially in England, the free childcare, which will continue to expand through till September. Then there is a number of key choices for a parent. And there is a very good website called Childcare Choices, which can be used by parents to understand and see where the value can be for them for each of their scenarios.
Great. I'm not sure if this is of interest to anyone, but I'm going to have a little bit of a quiz here for you, Simon, and or Karen and Rich, so you can know the answer. But I actually grew up inside a nursery school. My mum used to be a head teacher of a nursery school business that was in my house. So I had classrooms downstairs, our living room was upstairs, and that was my upbringing. And I remember the year that childcare vouchers were first introduced, but can you remember it on our panel? I've got a little quiz. Can you all give your answers? Karen, what was the first year childcare vouchers were introduced? I'll come to you, Simon. I'll come to you, Richard and Andy. Quick guess. No AI Googling here. Let's have a go, Karen.
I'm trying to think. I know when it ended. I'm going to guess 2010
Okay, Simon.
for RTI.
I'm gonna when they were introduced, when the first ones appeared.
Were first introduced. There's a little clue in there. I was living in the nursery school at the time, so I hadn't left.
Yes. Well, that could only be a few years ago, Nick. But I'm going to say 95.
Okay, Richard.
I'm going older.
Hmm.
I'm in the 80s, late 80s. Let's say 80.
Go on.
88, 89.
Oh, Andy.
Yeah.
We
can't hear you again.
It's but don't worry, Richard's nailed it. 1989, first
1989.
Well, you see, got the Fizz Masters here. This was like their fun. Anyway, I know
we had them in my first job, which went from 85 to 90. So it had to be before 90.
There you go. Now, that's that. This is the wisdom of our panel.
Now, a challenge that's going on here, Nick, and it might be part of it, is there are some organisations there actively promoting to individuals and employers a scheme which HMRC have warned us about in various prior employer bulletins, which, as Rich has quite ably indicated, the criteria for workplace pension, and they are a pretense. So then some of these schemes, they're not a workplace pension at all, and the employer control is minimal, if anything, and some of them is limited to the parent of the child that's there. So there is no financial commitment or risk on the employer at all, apart from sending a bit of money. And so that appeared, I think it's about 2 or 3 employer bulletins and outlined the law. But those organisations are still promoting that you can salary sacrifice with tax national insurance relief, even more than the former voucher scheme if you could join it. So above the £52 a week or whatever it was, or £50, saying that, you could put as much money in as you like to these schemes. It all works. Those organisations also promote other things which are doubtful work either. So as an illustration, unless you're actually giving groceries to your employees, so-called grocery voucher schemes will be subject to Class 1 national insurance because vouchers are, and you're not giving groceries. So there's a bit of a buyer beware moment, thinking that actually you've got some people actively out there promoting schemes because we're all paying 15% national insurance and we want to save that are promoting items that won't save you 15%. And potentially in the next 6 years, when you're caught, will end you up with a large bill because they don't work.
And you won't get sympathy from HMRC. Ignorance is not an excuse, but they are really vamping up. And as you said, Simon, it's not just workplace, is it? They say, oh, you can have these, it's anything and everything. And these employers, because of the cost of sort of taking the bait, and then they come through, if you'll get them yourself, and you're like, you want a salary sacrifice scheme for what? And of course, it's payroll. We can't advise because it's tax advice, but we have to refer. And we're saying, please go and get some help. Just go double check that this is real, because it doesn't sound it.
Right. Anything else I want to add, or should we jump into the SD Worx Academy? Got some great courses coming up between now and the next session, so let's come over to that. our SD Worx Academy. By the way, if there are any hot topics you want us to cover, we may have a couple of minutes at the end. So any questions you still want us to answer, please do put them in the questions box. We'll try and raise it as we come. You can see in front of you there, the SD Worx Academy we have on the 27th of June, National Minimum Wage Advanced course. On the 11th of July, payrolling benefits in kind. The 19th of August, UK Payroll Part 1, Income Tax and National Insurance. 20th of August, UK Payroll Part 2, Starters and Leavers, Student Loans and Statutory Payments. And the 22nd of August, Salary Sacrifice, what it is and why. The reason we put those August ones in there is we don't, I think, have an August PQT. So put those in your diary now. What I'm going to do is just put a link in the chat where you can see, browse those courses for yourself with a link straight through. So I'm just put that into the chat while everybody is here, and you can hopefully follow those and sign up for yourself and have a browse of those courses. Loads there for you to get involved in. So please do take a look. Simon, you're obviously quite close to some of these courses. Anything you'd like to add? You know how they run and what they're all about.
Sure. A lot of these are run by my area. Some of them are by a partner trainer that many of us know very well. And if you're wanting education or knowledge in depth, you will have a no holds barred type discussion, and they're very interactive, so they're more consultative. Equally, if there are other topics that people want covered, just let the Academy know, and they'll go into them. And of course, you've got Richard here with his organisation that will do very similar sort of training and course. And invariably, these topics are invaluable for you as we plan these next 2 years, because there's significant change, and the earlier we're prepared, the better.
Absolutely. And just to remind everybody, if maybe you've been watching this or you have colleagues that you feel really could have benefited from today's content, this will be re-released on the Payroll podcast in audio format and on YouTube as well, where you can re-watch us all talking about today's topics. So please do check out the YouTube channel. Please do subscribe to the Payroll podcast, and we'll have all of this covered. And if you haven't checked out recently, actually, I've just released an episode on Payroll Congress for another group of payroll experts was sharing their views on the world of payroll. And of course, there was a great episode recently about why payroll deserves a seat at the C-suite table with the wonderful Maria Mason. If you haven't checked that out, please do have a look. I'll put a quick link in the chat in just a moment. Right. Anything else you want to add in terms of hot topics, Simon? We did actually mention in my my opening about the HMRC hacking situation. We didn't have everything planned in today. It was only announced 2 days ago. We've got a couple of minutes. I don't know if that's something you want to discuss, or there's anything else that Richard, Karen, Andy, or yourself would like to raise for our audience while we have a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that might impacting the employees of people that work for the organisations we're paying, as it were. But it's interesting. I think Karen, Richard, and I probably have known a little bit about this for a couple of weeks because the communications come out. But it's more, I think, gone public, hasn't it? But it's interesting that 100,000 self-assessment accounts have been hacked, in effect, and fraudulent refund claims have been populated. Now, HMRC have stopped them, I think, or if they haven't stopped them, they're restoring everything so that if the reclaims are genuine, they're going to the individuals and not these sort of interrupting agents that are brought into play. But it's just interesting how prevalent. And part of the employee bulletin yesterday also was on further guidance being issued for the umbrella market. Now, there will be genuine compliant umbrella organisations, but the list is now over 150, I think, organisations or umbrellas that are promoting or have been caught promoting tax avoidance scheme. And there's a new conduct code that comes into play. And that aligns also a little bit with the agency sort of stuff, because obligations will move, because a lot of agency workers are paid via another umbrella, that obligations will start to come into play. So it's just interesting to watch. The oddity about these things is you think, oh, these must be people on the edge and of the working world, is to know that they're NHS workers and local government workers and work in education and schools and things like that. So it's a little bit troubling that there are actually a lot of almost public sector, not necessarily central government, but close to government workers that are being targeted in these ways for these. But there's a lot of subjects in yesterday's employer bulletin, and I think the agent bulletin 132 as it came out today. So interesting reading at this time.
Very good.
I was
Well,
going
of
to add,
course,
if I may, as well, as a warning, do review, bearing in mind what payroll hold, really do check your policy, because cybersecurity, I think many people think, oh, nobody would be bothered about us. No, if you use email, they may well be bothered about you, because it's not physical human beings that said, oh, I'll have a look at company X. They've got AI running in the background of all of this. And all it takes, and I'm aware of a case of where an employee had taken a scan of their spouse's passport and emailed it to themselves. Innocent, who would have thought? But as it happened, that company ended up with a ransom. And it was because the AI had picked up on, oh, that's good information. Thought, oh, what else can we get from there? And was able to hack in. Now, in this case, it wasn't payroll data, it was other data, but it was still personal data and financial details that might get. So, I can't reiterate enough. It scares the living daylights out of me, all of this. So just make sure your house is in order and you're as protected as you can possibly be.
well, perhaps payroll cybersecurity could be a topic for a future PQT, and some of the considerations that we should be thinking about in what is a very quickly and emerging and evolving world of AI and technology and people trying to take advantage. I think that would probably help our audience to feel a little bit more secure. If we were to give them some information that might support them. And of course, someone like Simon, who's part of various payroll software groups and is part of SD Worx, will be able to give us hopefully some great guidance on that as well. So maybe one for a future subject. Well, listen, I want to give a huge thank you to our panel. We're right on time today, which is wonderful. Our next PQT, I thought I've got a different date here. It's going to be Thursday. Of course, it's just moved. It's Thursday, the 17th of July. Please ignore my chat where I put 31st of July. It's been moved to the 17th. But please do sign up and join us next time when it returns. It'll be our last one for the summer. So thank you today for Karen Thompson for joining us, to Simon Parsons, to Richard George, and right on time, Andy Nichols at 3 o'clock for his pensions contribution. It's been great to be your host. My name is Nick Day, and we look forward to seeing you all again in just a few weeks on the 17th of July. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.